Hello, everybody. This is Echoes of War. I'm Craig from the Pacific War Channel, joined here by my co-host, Gaurav. How are you?
Hey, Craig, great to be back and really looking forward to today's episode. I'm super excited.
Yes, it's certainly a crowd pleaser. It's one of the biggest history episodes just about everybody does, the naval battle of Trafalgar. But before we jump into it, I just want to say to the audience, if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider joining the YouTube membership or the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to an exclusive podcast series. It's about 20 plus episodes and ongoing. You get early access to all the content I make and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. But stating all of that, I think we can just jump right into it because this is going to be a long and gritty episode. For those who don't know, the Battle of Trafalgar, which is, I guess you could say, the greatest naval battle in history. I personally like the Battle of Tsushima, but most people would argue this one. It's a pivotal engagement, during the War of the Third Coalition, and that's against Napoleon Bonaparte. It's
I'm just
followed.
going to step it, Craig. Tsushima was a great tactical victory, and in terms of long-term strategic victory, it doesn't come close to Trafalgar.
Yep, sure. So everyone loves Trafalgar, but obviously, so this is going to be the French against almost everybody else. Of course, France is allied, with Spain and some others, but it's during the War of the Third Coalition, and that means that there was a War of the Second Coalition. For those of you who aren't keen on the Napoleonic War era and all the battles that it consists of, but if you've been following this series, we've already done quite a few episodes covering some of this, and I think I'll leave it to Gareth to kind of set the table as to how we even find ourselves at this great naval battle.
Sure. Just can you just confirm? And for the audience, we do have a visual
Oh,
component,
yeah.
so please do take a look at our video because we are going to show maps, portraits, the images of ships, etc. So it would definitely be in your interest. So
Yeah,
you
well,
can
actually,
actually pick your it.
I'll just say it right now. We did an episode quite a while back. It was the Battle of the Nile, which was kind of the lead up to this one, to be honest. And if you weren't watching, or I don't know if we even had the animations at that point, but it's so much easier if you are watching this on YouTube because there is going to be maps with ship placements and everything. I really strongly recommend you come over to YouTube. And to be honest, it's the only way we can even remotely get some ad revenue to try and support this channel because the audio podcast platforms absolutely we make like a nickel a month on that basically. So yeah,
Ouch.
please consider watching us on YouTube, and it really helps. And YouTube did an update recently, so apparently my podcasts are now appropriately on YouTube Music. If anybody uses that thing, I don't, but please use it.
I just have the app. I just have the app. That's it.
There you go. Please carry on,
All
Garth.
right. Sure. As you can see, this is a map of the War of the Second Coalition by the belligerents. And as you can see, France in the dark blue with its allies, which is Spain, Denmark, Norway, the Low Countries, and Northern Italy. They pretty much are fighting the Russians, Austrians, Ottomans, and Brits. And it is during this war we have our conflict as well, which cover the Battle of the Nile, Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, his return to France, taking over the first consulship, and his great victory at Marengo, which is one of his most famous victories. So on 25th March 1802, the Treaty of Amiens is signed, which officially ends hostilities. And it was a treaty between Britain and France. Now, there was some Now, this war ultimately was a seesaw, but towards the end, which is what matters when territories and treaties are being discussed for bartering, the French got the better of the conflicts towards the end of the period. Start, Napoleon's Egyptian expedition was not a success. The Battle of the Nile took place. So that time it pivoted to the Allies. Then he took over, and in the land warfare, they won. Now, some of the key terms of the treaty was Britain to return the Cape Colony to the Batavian Republic, which is the Low Countries at this point. Britain to return most of its captured Dutch Guyana to the Batavian Republic. They are to withdraw their forces from Egypt. Spain agreeing to recognize British rule in Trinidad. The island of Ceylon is ceded to Britain. France to withdraw its forces from Naples and the Papal States. Um, Gibraltar is to remain under British control, which is very important for Britain. Menorca is to be returned to Spain, restoration of prisoners and hostages, and the Peninsular Republic to be recognized as a legal entity. Now, all of these parties signed the treaty, and this is like an image that just shows the signing. The signatory from the French side being Joseph Bonaparte, the future king of Spain, albeit briefly, and Charles Cornwallis, the guy who's famous for surrendering to the Americans.
I was gonna say like that's the only thing anyone knows about him. But yeah.
Well, he also had General Charles O'Hara, who surrendered to George Washington and also
hmm
surrendered to Napoleon. And too
Hmm.
long.
Yeah.
I digress. And however, despite this treaty being signed, tensions did not abate. Both sides kind of did not fulfill their ends of the obligation. The French continued to pester British trade and shipping in the Caribbean. And it also, Britain started to get worried that France wants to take back Suez in Egypt area. And they believe that only 10 to 15,000 French soldiers would be needed, and that's it. That area is there. And in Italy, he transforms the Cisalpine Republic, which is in northern Italy, into the new republic, where he has more power, which is kind of affronting Naples, the Pope, and Austria, given their vested interest in the region. He also annexed the region of Piedmont into France proper. So this entire area did, which is normally in Italy, was annexed to France. And Britain still kept Malta. And Napoleon did actually try to use Malta to be a pin on which Britain and Russia could fight, because at that time, Russia actually wanted to expand its sphere of influence into the region of the Mediterranean. And he was hoping to play Britain and Russia off each other for Malta. So it was quite a messy situation. Now, hostilities break out with Britain and France quite early. And this is on May 18th, 1803, Britain officially declares war. So you had a period of peace for about 15 to 16 months, which between revolutionary France till the final defeat of Napoleon was the longest peace period. This shows how chaotic the era was. Now, at the time, it's only a war between Britain and France and Spain, since Spain has thrown in its lot completely with the British, sorry, with the French, my bad. And 1804, Napoleon also crowns himself Emperor of the French in his very famous painting and event, which kind of starts to rub the other European rulers, especially Austria, Russia, the King of Prussia, quite wrong, because they now have to consider him as an equal, which they don't want to, because this guy's a product of the French Revolution. He's not legitimate to them. Now, what ultimately would trigger the war is his continued expansion of power into Italy. But Britain would use this opportunity to create a third coalition, as we can see here, where France and Spain are allied initially against Britain, Russia. I know the map is not really showing Austria, but we know Austria was there, and Naples. They're supposed to be on the coalition side as well. So at this point in time, Napoleon has concentrated his Grande Armée around the town of Boulogne, and this is in preparation for an invasion of Britain. And the army's recently been reorganized into the core system, which is a real tactical innovation. And at this moment, it's led by very competent generals and marshals. So he does have a very powerful land force, and if it does land in Britain, it's going to wreak havoc. The problem is the senior service of Britain, the Royal Navy. And they have blockaded the French fleet across all of its ports in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. And Napoleon does know if he needs to get through to Britain, he needs to distract the Royal Navy or defeat them. Mostly he just wants to look at a distraction since he knows he's probably not going to win, but he needs that clear opportunity to allow safe passage for his men and supplies. Now, ultimately, as Britain was successful in persuading Russia, Sweden, Naples, and Austria to join it in what would become the third coalition, the Grande Armée would be departing Boulogne. And this is just like some images that I've just found of like the depictions. And this would be Britain's primary defense, the wooden walls, as some people called it, or the senior service, the Royal Navy.
I know
So
you might
Napoleon
not be
would.
able to answer this, but I was actually just curious. Do you know
Mhm.
like a rough estimate of the difference in ship numbers between the Royal Navy and the Spanish French Armada?
Are you talking about their overall fleet disposition or what was present at Trafalgar?
Either or, I
Like,
guess, at this point. And I know it's more of an issue of quality over quantity, especially for this battle, but I was just curious.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, at this point in time, if we combine total ships of the line, so I'm not
Yeah,
including
of course.
frigate, brigs, and
Yeah,
schooners,
ships of the line.
Britain had about 120, 130 ships of the line at this moment, from first rates to fourth or fifth rates. And if I'm not mistaken, the French and Spanish together were slightly larger.
Hmm. Yeah, okay.
But as you rightly alluded, Greg, it was quality of British seamanship that really won them the day in most engagements.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a bit of time when we discuss the age of sail.
Hmm.
We have that section for our audience. So as the Grand Army before the Grand Army departs, Napoleon is focused on England. He's literally sold half of the United States to the United States from French Louisiana to fund this particular expedition in
Greatest
particular.
deal other than Alaska. Well, I don't know. They're both great deals.
But yeah, so he does actually have some pretty ridiculous ideas for naval planning. And the invasion of England from the naval theater goes through several iterations. The first plan, which was put forward in May 1804 by Napoleon, sorry, was to be executed between July and September. And it included Admiral Trevel's fleet from Toulon, which would consist of 10 ships of the line and 11 frigates to break out. They would evade the patrolling British fleet of Admiral Nelson, as Nelson is given the blockade duty in the Mediterranean for the French. And then they would be slipping past Admiral Alexander Cochrane's fleet of Ferrol and enter the Bay of Biscay. That is, for our audience, the Bay of Biscay is here. So they've reached the French Atlantic seaboard. So their main competition is now going to be the Channel Fleet of the British, which is their most powerful naval body. And while this is taking place, when they reach the Bay of Biscay, then they will make to the city of Rochefort, another French naval base towards Brittany, and they will be joined by further 6 ships of the line. So it gives them about 27 ships, 16 of them being ships of the line. And while this is taking place, Vice Admiral Gantuname would sail from Brest with 23 ships of the line and head out to the Atlantic. And the idea is, as the British would see the large body of French warships move out, the Channel Fleet will be distracted in sufficient number since they would want to maintain at least numerical superiority to allow the fleet that broke out from Toulon to run into the channel and up to Boulogne, where the these warships can then escort the entire invasion armada over to Britain. Sounds very easy, right? And all that the plan needed was very favorable weather, avoiding detection by three whole British fleets, the British Channel Fleet falling for the decoy, and the British admirals being completely incompetent and not noticing what was actually going on. This plan, anyways, was never even came to fruition because Admiral Trevell actually did pass away suddenly on the 19th of August. So this plan never took place. And funny thing is, the Admiral Cochrane I was mentioned, whose squadrons are patrolling off Ferrol, he is the uncle to the future Admiral Thomas Cochrane, another very distinguished British sailor. He's not going to play a big role in this episode, but kind of neat how we have some pretty big dynastic and well-reputed families. Now, the second plan, which was planned after the death of Admiral Trevell, was way more ambitious and consisted of distinct operations. The new successor and commander, that is Admiral Pierre Villeneuve, will take 5,600 ships and sail the 10 ships into the Mediterranean on 21st October. Now, they will go to Cadiz and evade, having evaded Nelson's ships, and pass through the Straits of Gibraltar. And he's supposed to detach two ships with almost 2,000 soldiers. And then Villeneuve is to move to the West Indies. And the two detached ships would also sail and try to capture St. Helena from the Britain before returning to Senegal and stir up trouble in West Africa. While the Rear Admiral Messissier, I'm sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, will sail from Rochefort on 1st November with 6 ships of the line and 3,500 soldiers, evade the British blockade and sail to the West Indies, and reinforce the French garrisons there at Martinique and Guadeloupe and capture the British colonies of St. Lucia and Dominica. After this, they will unite these two forces. So whatever was left of Villeneuve's forces and these guys, to get a force of about 15 to 16 ships of the line and 5,000 soldiers. And they can then raid British and Dutch possessions in the Caribbean before crossing back through the Atlantic. And then while this is taking place, the main fleet at Brest, with 21 ships of the line and 18,000 soldiers, were supposed to sail away on the 23rd of November, pass through the English Channel and into the North Sea, and then sail straight up all around Scotland, Scapa Flow, and they were to land on the northern coast of Ireland and land their troops. And then they will launch a full-scale invasion of Ireland. And then this admiral, after he deploys the soldiers, he will sail to the west coast of Ireland, arriving in the western approaches, so that would be around here, to meet Villeneuve and Messie's force, which should give them a theoretical numerical strength of almost 35 to 40 ships of the line in total. If you also include maybe detachments that would be sent as reinforcements throughout. And then the intention is this massive force is then going to sweep through to the English Channel and, say, tell the Channel Fleet that it's going to go to the bottom of their home sea. So I don't know, Craig, which plan do you think was even more crazy?
I mean, both are unbelievably ambitious, but I kind of say the second one. Yeah.
Now, the plan changed again in January of 1805, as the now Emperor of the French reacted to the new situation, as he's now starting to worry about the land theater. At this time, Britain is negotiating with Austria and Russia. There is no formal third coalition. And he does not want to commit now to the possible invasion of Britain if there is a real threat coming to France on the continent. it would not be easy for him to recall any invasion force that he puts across because it would require another set of clear window for the transports and men to re-embark and return. So this is where he temporarily puts the invasion plans on hold and develop a new strategy where the largely idle French fleet. So I guess they are trying to still be the fleet in being to counter the British. Why does every major power that goes up against Britain in a naval theater only want to be a fleet in being?
I mean,
Now,
it does change. No, it does change eventually. Like it's actually France who comes up with a decent Anyways, side assist.
true enough. And in this plan, William and Mississippi were ordered to embark their fleets and sail for the West Indies and attack the British possessions. So still continuing that same aspect from the second plan. And this would now force Britain in Napoleon's used to relocate resources rapidly to the Caribbean. Now, it's not really a bad assumption given the very lucrative sugar trade that goes on in the region. And the Missile, now the thing is, Admiral Missile duly sailed from Rochefort on 11th Jan with 5 ships of the line, evaded Admiral Thomas Graves' blockading force, and escaped into the Atlantic that forced Rear Admiral Alexander Cochrane's squadrons to pursue him. Villeneuve sails from Toulon on the 18th of January, but unfortunately he heads straight into a gale. And during that time, 2 British frigates see this departure. They reported to Nelson, and Nelson immediately rushed his fleet to sea, determining that considering the weather and the fact that the French had embarked troops, that Villeneuve is planning to go east, not west. So he believes that Villeneuve is going to maybe attack the Italian coast, so probably the Kingdom of Naples. He might be going to Malta or even as far as Egypt or Greece. Nelson rushes out, hoping to intercept them off Sardinia. But when they have not appeared by 25th January, he worried he had missed them, and press went east. And by 7th of February 1805, he is in Alexandria itself. So I guess he must, knowing Nelson's ego, I think he was quite happy to see his former victory ground. And he then turns westward, reaches Malta on the 19th of February, where he receives news that Villeneuve is back in Toulon. So it turns out this expedition was for nothing because within 2 days of departure, so that is 20th of January, Villeneuve had gone back to Toulon, as the sailors of his fleet just could not cope with that weather. And the problem that Nelson faced was both frigates that spotted the movement, both went back to report it. So he actually did not have recon for a couple of days. Quite costly. Now, this is the disposition in March 1805 of the naval forces. So there is a Franco-Dutch squadron of 9 ships in the Netherlands, 9 ships of the line, and they are covered by a force of 11 ships of the line of Admiral Keith Down. And neither squadron is going to be involved in the campaign, but it's just to show how Britain and France are deploying their naval assets. Now, the main Channel fleet was under Admiral William Cornwallis and Vice Admiral Charles Cotton, and it had 15 ships of the line, detached into squadrons of 5 ships. Now, you had Admiral Thomas Grave blockading Rochefort with 5 ships of the line. So there are 3 squadrons of 5 ships of the line. Sorry. And then you had Vice Admiral Robert Calder blocking Ferrol, that is closer to Spain. And then these ships, these 15 ships, and the other 5 are under Cotton himself. These 15 ships are supposed to blockade 21 ships of the line at Brest under Vice Admiral Guanteaume. Now, there were 3 to 4 French ships of the line at Rochefort, 4 ships of the line, and 8 Spanish ships of the line at Ferrol. And there were 7 French and Spanish ships at Cadiz as well. And this Port of Cadiz right now was under the eyes of Rear Admiral John Orte and 5 ships of the line. And at Cartagena, there are a further 6 ships of the line. And the French naval base at Toulon is also home to 11 ships of the line. So it's a sizable part of the squadron and their main Mediterranean assets. Now, Cartagena and Toulon are being watched over by Nelson, who has 12 ships of the line as part of his Mediterranean command at this moment. And each of them will have a number of sloops, frigates, and brigs, whose primary jobs are more of conveying messages and moving persons from ship to ship. Now, when the Trafalgar campaign began, what happened was the fleet at Brest, which is the single most concentrated unit of French ships, was to embark 3,000 troops and set to Ferrol, where they can then, with superior numbers, chase away the blockade force of Vice Admiral Robert Calder. Now, with they will have 33 ships of the line, 6 frigates, and 2 store ships, and sail to Martinique, which will be in the Caribbean. And at this concurrently, Villeneuve is to embark 3,000 men from Toulon and break out into the Atlantic and take the 7 ships of Cadiz. So this should give him a theoretical strength of about 17 ships of the line. And then all of these forces are to converge and unite and sail back into the Atlantic and sweep away any resistance. Theoretically, yeah, it makes sense they will be able to achieve this numerical superiority. But the problems went awry from the start. The key port at Brest was being blockaded closely by Vice Admiral Cotton. And since the French admirals had clear orders that you're not to engage with the British Navy, he waited for favorable conditions to 26 March when a fog came, and that's gonna help him mask his movements. But as typical luck would have it in military luck, the day once he starts departing, the fog blows clear. And the British see exactly what he's up to. And he's temporarily trapped outside, and now the Admiral Cotton's British ships of the line are moving in to engage. And the French retreat back into the port. Admiral Cotton does not pursue. He's just content to block up the French fleet at Brest. And this is actually a pretty good idea. Night attacks are quite daring and risky. As we saw, even Nelson's brilliant plan at the Nile did suffer some planning failures where one of his ships of the line not able to participate because it ran aground. And you also don't want to attack a enemy fleet in port where defensive batteries on the shore are there to support. That is just suicide. Now, in the meantime, Admiral Villeneuve and his second in command, which is Rear Admiral Pierre Lapelle, they get ready for departure. And as Nelson had been spotted near Barcelona, Villeneuve had hoped that by sailing south from Toulon and passing east of the Balearic Islands, he might avoid any British patrols. Now, Nelson was actually preparing a trap and having allowed himself to be observed of Spain. He had withdrawn to a position south of Sardinia to hoping that in attempting to avoid the spotted location of the Brits, Villeneuve would sail straight into them. 30th March, Villeneuve's fleet finally set sail. And it is observed by 2 British frigates, the Active and Phoebe. And as Nelson hoped, they are moving straight past the Balearic Islands on the east and down towards Sardinia. Now, unfortunately for them, the frigates lost sight on 1st April. Happy April Fool's Day, I will just add that. And at that time, Villeneuve coincidentally comes across a Spanish merchant who gave like the citing that the British are actually waiting off Sardinia to Villeneuve. Nelson's foil has been, uh, you know, like the ambush has been like detected. Villeneuve realizes he's walking into a trap, and he turns west immediately, passing off the Balearics. And Nelson was in the dark. He's just waiting for a French fleet of Sardinia, which is not coming. Villeneuve moves to Cartagena, but instead of waiting for those 6, 7 ships of the line to join him, he did not dare wait any longer. As this is like, I think, a problem in that time where wireless communication did not exist. The Spanish ships also did not want to move till orders came from Madrid. And he's kind of terrified of Nelson. And Villeneuve passes through the Straits of Gibraltar on the 8th of April, and he's been observed by the British. And from Cadiz, he does collect a third-rate ship of the line, the Agile, and sets across to the Atlantic, followed by six Spanish ships of the line and a frigate under Federico Gravina. So it's now a force of about 17 ships of the line with at least 3, 4 frigates. Now, Nelson had been alerted of the departure, and since he did not make contact with them at Sardinia as he hoped, he had to just comb the area with his frigates and scouts to try to gain any intel. Now, by 8th May, he's moving out of the Mediterranean because since his scouting came up with negative reports of the fleet of Villeneuve, he correctly deduced that they've just moved out of the Mediterranean. And one of John Orr's ships, the British squadron near Malta, did confirm that to Nelson. And he said that the French had sailed through the Straits a month earlier and had not headed north. And Nelson correctly deduces that he is going to the West Indies. Now, Villeneuve arrives at the West Indies on the 14th of May, and then is also the Spanish ships have also caught up. Then they resupply, they settle into waiting for the main fleet from Brest to catch up with them. And they are completely in the dark. They do not know that this fleet had tried to escape but failed. Now, initially they were reluctant because Villeneuve is not the kind of character to really take the initiative on this, forced to by a commander. They do start to attack Martinique, and the British held Diamond Rock after 2 weeks of just sitting idle. That's it. 2 weeks they were just sitting there, doing absolutely nothing. The small British garrison thus end up surrendering by 2nd June. It's probably a small garrison, and you have few thousand French troops with pretty big guns. And Villeneuve, at that time, gets a frigate, the Didon, with orders. He is to wait for 2 new ships of the line and then spend a month attacking and capturing British colonies. He was then to sail his entire force to link up with the fleet at Brest and cover the invasion flotilla. Now, these orders also tell one crucial thing. They told Villeneuve that Nelson is in Egypt right now looking for him, whereas he's not yet there. And at the time when he got the orders, Craig, would you like to guess how far off Nelson was from the West Indies?
Pretty far.
No, he was 2 days away.
Oh,
He
jeez.
had already deduced, so even though he's a month late, Villeneuve sitting around and doing 2 weeks of nothing, and also a protracted siege, it's cost him time. And Nelson is now just breathing down his throat. And Villeneuve gathers his forces and presses towards Antigua, but on 7th June, he does capture a British convoy. And from there, he does discover that Nelson has already arrived at Barbados. So he knows that a pretty large British force has arrived. He decides to break off and just sail back to Europe. And on 11th June, uh, he sails back to Europe and France. And General Honoré Charles Riel noted, "We have been masters of the sea for 3 weeks with a landing force of 7 to 8,000 men and have not been able to attack a single island." Now, when Nelson arrives, he just receives fragments of information and he sets off in pursuit, but the information was wrong. William and his fleet were north of Barbados and heading further north with each day. And deliberate misinformation, bad sightings, and sheer coincidence, Nelson actually kept going south for 4 days. So Villeneuve's getting his gap back. And then on the 8th of June, he finally gets the concrete information he needs. And on 12th June, he reaches Antigua and learns that Villeneuve had passed the day before, headed for Europe. On 13th June, Nelson himself also departs with his squadrons to Europe. And he anticipated that Villeneuve will either go for Cadiz or would try to go back into the Mediterranean. Villeneuve was actually heading over to Ferrol to link up with the forces there. And, he was hoping to catch them. And Nelson wanted to move on a direct intercept course so that he can intercept the fleet at sea and not give them the chance to link up with a friendly port, which is going to be defended by gun batteries. And Nelson misses them because he tries to plot a direct route, kind of reminiscent of his Alexandria expedition in 1797, where he correctly deduced that they were going to Egypt and Alexandria, but plotted a very direct course that he actually sailed through the invasion convoy at night. Now, he eventually arrives at Gibraltar on 19th of July, after which the fleet goes and joins the Channel Fleet. And then he takes his flagship HMS Victory into Portsmouth, and he sends dispatches to the Admiralty. Now, it is around 19th June also that the Admiralty get the news of the Villeneuve's fleet sailing northwards from Antigua. And they were not heading for the Straits, but to the Bay of Biscay this time. So this is what they get. Now, they will rush to Lord Brabham, who's the first Lord of the Admiralty, and he orders Vice Admiral Robert Calder, whose squadron of the Channel Fleet is watching over Ferrol, to attempt to intercept the combined fleet as it arrived off Cape Finisterre. And to assist him with the task, he is reinforced with Admiral Calder getting an additional 5 ships of the line joining him. Now, unfortunately for them, in the Battle of Cape Finisterre, the British do get the victory. They just suffer 200 casualties in an engagement, and they inflict over 1,200 casualties almost 2,000 casualties on the French and Spanish, even capturing 2 ships of the line. So he has slightly dented the enemy attack, but he still went in the traditional tactics of the time, which was a parallel broadside, which allowed Villeneuve to escape. And so it was kind of like a muted victory. And even though the British did not lose any ships and had like almost a 10-to-1 favorable ratio in the casualties, the Admiralty were really pissed off with Vice Admiral Robert Calder. He was actually summoned back to London and would face a court martial. He did not get any charge, but he was severely reprimanded. Now that the fleets have linked up, Villeneuve has now taken whatever ships he has and has gone to Cadiz and is waiting for uh, like orders because he's not moving into Brest and supporting the Channel invasion. And since he did not move towards the north, which is what Napoleon wanted, towards Boulogne, Napoleon actually flew into a rage. He said, "What a navy! What an admiral! All the sacrifices for naught." And this was pretty much the killing blow for any invasion threat that Britain was going to face from the pole. And on 27th of August, the Grande Armée actually starts breaking camp at around Boulogne because the War of the Third Coalition has now started its land theater, and they are moving to the Danube to engage the Austrian army of General Mack, where Napoleon's going to strike a pretty devastating blow to the coalition. Now, at Cadiz, while he's waiting for orders and just trying to distract the British fleet, we are now getting ready for our final engagement. So I'll take this opportunity now before for discussing the fleets and their composition heading into the battle. On the day of the battle, Nelson would be having 27 ships of the line and 6 smaller vessels against 33 ships of the line of the French. Yeah, actually, thanks, Greg. I'll just bring up a map. Just one. Could you see the map, Greg?
Yeah.
So in Cadiz, slightly north of the eventual battle place, the ship fleets are mustering. Now, the British of the 27, they initially have 34 ships, but 5 will be detached to get supplies for the fleet. So that's why I've taken the number 27. And he does let like Admiral Calder uh, return in HMS Prince of Wales to face his court martial. Calder is attached to Nelson's squadron and under his command, but he likes the admiral to go with his dignity that he actually gives up a second-rate ship of the line. So the British have 3 first rates, 4 second rates, and 20 third rates. And the Franco-Spanish fleet will be having 4 first rates and 29 third rates. For the audience, a ship of the line is kind of given these ratings. And a first rate ship of the line is anything that has over 100 guns. A second rate has 90 to 98 guns. And third rate is 60 to 80 guns. First and second rates are exclusively three gun deck ships. Third rates can be 3 or 2 as well. In total, on the main ships of the line, the British have 2,152 guns and a force of around 70 to 18,000 soldiers, whereas the Franco-Spanish fleet has over 2,630 guns. And they have an estimated complement strength between 27 to 30,000. And despite the numerical and gunpowder disparity, the quality is decisively in Britain's favor. And this is something I found pretty interesting that I just want to tell. Not all the British ships that fought in this battle, Greg, and the audience, were constructed in Britain. There were actually 3 French ships fighting for the Royal Navy. They were captured in different engagements.
Of course.
Now, one of them was Bellicelle, which was captured of the port of Lorient. We also have HMS Pathier and Tonnant, which were actually French ships that fought against the British at the Battle of the Nile.
Of course, yes.
So it's quite a coincidence that you have this. And similarly, actually, you have HMS Swiftsure, which fought for the Royal Navy in the Battle of the Nile and was later captured in 1801 and was present to the French service. And he also had HMS Berwick, which was captured off the island of Corsica in the prelude to the war. And I just found that really interesting as well. Now, as I said, Nelson did have five more ships of the line, but they had been diverted for convoy and supply duty, though he was expecting them to return. And Villeneuve, on the other hand, was having a supply situation, but he could not rectify it easily. And the ships were not able to even train or obtain the stores needed. And this is also an interesting thing. Despite having the numerical superiority, they are still actually undercrewed, the Franco-Spanish, by over 4,000 men. And they are kind of in a poor state of repair, being blockaded for most of the last few years. Whereas the British ships are fresh. The crews are experienced. They have been sailing for months and months. The admirals are experienced. And Villeneuve does get the news that he is being replaced. And he does not want his to be disgraced. And that is what is going to cause him to make a move and start sailing towards Toulon to try to escape Nelson's clutch. And this fleet has now been ordered that they will move back into the Mediterranean and link up with the seven ships at Cartagena and then attack Naples. Now, Craig, I think we should talk a little bit of the admirals. I
Hmm.
think you had some things to say of all the four major admirals that are going to be involved in this.
Yeah, so let's start off with the key player. Can you see the picture?
Yep, again.
So, of course, I don't think anyone hasn't heard of Horatio Nelson. He's is he the most famous admiral in history? Maybe. I think
There's a good case
perhaps.
for it.
Yeah, there's perhaps you could make a case for it. Definitely top three list. He's always there for sure. Not giving away his signature victory, which is, a battle we'll be talking about, but Horatio Nelson, he was born in 1758, Norfolk, England. He joined the Royal Navy at a very young age and he rose through the ranks due to exceptional leadership and tactical skills. He first saw action during the American Revolutionary War, where he served in the Caribbean. By the 1790s, he became,
I just add,
yeah,
he did also get lucky. His uncle was a captain in the Royal Navy at the time.
yeah, of course.
His and his first ship was actually he was a seaman on his uncle's ship that he was captaining. And when Nelson was actually writing his lieutenant's exam, he was underaged for it. And his uncle happened to be the chief taker of kind of like reviewer of the exam.
Lucky him. Well, I mean,
Indeed.
of all of the admirals I'm about to talk about, you people will be fascinated to find out what ages they entered the Royal Navy. For those who are not privy to the that time period, you joined up pretty young, to say the least.
Uh,
But
I think just 12 years old.
yeah, some yeah. But by the 1790s, he became quite well known for his role in the Mediterranean theater, particularly at the Battle of the Nile in 1798, which is a episode we covered not too long ago. So if the audience hasn't already seen that one, I do recommend it. He decisively,
Greg,
yeah,
just one thing. So like a lot of these guys join as cabin boys at 12 or 13 and ship's
mhm,
mates,
yeah, of
but
course,
that does not stop them from actually reaching the top. So
yeah,
two men who were ship's boys or such, they reached the rank of Admiral of the Fleet of the Royal Navy.
there you go. It's a real meritocracy
And
situation.
and I think another very famous name is here, Sir Francis Drake.
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, of course. And
This
well, I'd say Nelson's biggest claim to fame is something I don't want to give away. It's obviously the episode we're talking about, so I won't say too much more about Nelson. I tried to find, a little bit more information before the most famous battle he's going to be part of. But moving on to another admiral.
If you would like, I could add a little bit of some
Yeah,
exploits
sure,
he's
go for
had.
it.
So one of his major breakthroughs was actually the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. And that was a battle bit where Nelson was just one ship commander in Admiral John Jervis's fleet, which engaged a large Spanish fleet. And in that battle, one moment, I'm just bringing up a map. Unfortunately, the problem with a lot of these old maps is they're just so small. Just give me a second.
Psst. Hey, you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself? Uh-oh, you live in Japan, and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh no, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it, without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software, and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/the Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
Can you see the map? So the British were to come in between the two Spanish squadrons, with the bigger one to be on the British starboard side, and Admiral John Jervis wanted the fleet to move in a single column, and then, as you can see, go down and take a U-turn and then engage. And the Spanish ship, sorry, they started firing, and then realizing that this group on the right here would move north, and the larger group was also turning to head north, and they could just escape or cut off the British. Admiral Nelson, sorry, that time Commodore Nelson, who was just in the on his ship HMS Captain at that time, which is a third-rate ship of the line. He disobeys a direct order from his superior and cuts across the bow, like to intercept the Spanish advance. And he kind of holds them off with support from our Admiral Cuthbert as well, Admiral Collingwood as well. And Admiral Jervis was also quick to realize the situation and send support, and this ensured it was a great victory for the British. Now, officially, Nelson did not get any medal or gong for this, despite him playing a pivotal role. But at the same time, Jervis did not let court-martial him, which he could have, and Nelson would have been kicked out of the Royal Navy. But one of his lasting impacts from the Battle of the Nile was this Nelsonic band of brothers that he created from all the captains. He encouraged his officers to think, take the initiative, exploit the situation. And this actually improved the efficacy of every Royal Navy ship down the line. And of his 13 band of brothers from the Nile, 11 of them reached flag rank, with 4 of them even reaching the rank of a full admiral. So that's definitely another lasting legacy of his.
All right, here I'm going to pull up the next portrait. All right. Next significant figure we're going to be talking about is Pierre-Charles Villeneuve. Excuse me, Pierre-Charles Villeneuve. He was born on December the 12th of 1763 in Toulon, France. He was a very prominent naval officer who served in the French Navy during the late 18th century. He began his career at the age of 15, which I guess could be considered a bit older compared to some of the other people here. And he quickly rose through the ranks. He participated in various naval engagements. Villeneuve gained recognition during the Revolutionary Wars, and he played significant roles in the Mediterranean theater. In 1805, he was appointed commander of the Mediterranean Fleet, and he was tasked, as we've already said during this episode, with challenging British naval supremacy, which that must have really kind of sucked to be put in charge of that job, because it's not easy to say.
Especially with who you're going up against.
Yeah.
And this was not the first time Villeneuve has faced Nelson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to say his leadership was marked by the blockade of the British forces, which was pretty effective, and attempts to try and coordinate with, Napoleon Bonaparte's military strategies, which I would imagine was extremely challenging to try and match the land war with this. But Villeneuve faced numerous difficulties, as we've alluded to, miscommunication and logistical challenges. This is the age of sail. There is no telegraph line or anything like that, so it's pretty challenging. It's very slow when it comes to messages being sent back and forth. And yeah, he's going to be coming into this battle. I don't want to give away anything, though.
Yeah, I think we can move on to our next third admiral.
Yeah, here is him. It's a pretty good picture. So here we are. We have Cuthbert Collingwood, who was born September the 26th of 1748 in Newcastle. And he was a distinguished naval officer in the Royal Navy. He began his career at the age of 14, and he gained quite a lot of experience during, the 7 Years' War. By the late 18th century, he had established a reputation for naval leadership, particularly in the Caribbean and Mediterranean theaters. Collingwood played a key role in several significant battles, such as the capture of the French ship Bengal, and he served under Admiral Horatio Nelson during the Corsair campaign against France. He was known.
One fun fact.
Yeah.
Some of his first ships that he got as an actual command, and these are brigs and schooners and frigates, right? At that level. The commander he took that ship over from, Nelson.
Oh, there you go. He was known for his strategic acumen and skillful seamanship. By 1805, he was a vice admiral and Nelson's second in command. He's a very close partner with Nelson, which, was obviously crucial because their cooperation really, set the stage, certainly in this battle. And as you were alluding to, Nelson had a habit of letting his subordinates, try and think for themselves. And he kind of was, I guess you could say he was a good delegator, Nelson. So this guy will be able to kind of do his own thing somewhat. And last but not least, pull up this picture. We have Fulgencio Gravina, who was born in March the 1st of 1756 in Palma de Mallorca of Spain. And he's a very notable Spanish admiral whose naval career spanned significant conflicts of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. He joined the Spanish Navy at the age of 15, so again, a little bit older, participating in various maritime campaigns, including a lot of battles during the American Revolutionary War, where he earned recognition for leadership and strategic abilities. In the early 1800s, Gravina was instrumental in the defense of Spanish interests against British naval power. He was appointed to command the Spanish fleet in the Mediterranean theater, and he would play a vital role in various naval operations against Britain, which Gareth, you have already gone through. Gravina was notably involved in a certain battle that we're about to talk about, where, well, things aren't going to look so good, I think, for Gravina. But yeah.
I think before we just dive into the plans that both commanders made, I think it would be really good for the audience to understand the doctrine and the way navies tended to fight in the Age of Sail. Now, first of all, this is going to be the very famous HMS Victory, and this is just some amazing pics of her. I do hope when next time I go to England, I'm definitely taking a trip down to Portsmouth. But so, as I alluded to, the Age of Sail, you have the ships of the line, which are your primary ships, and these are essentially just massive floating artillery platforms. That's it. That's their only job. They're pretty slow, being completely wind driven. Top speeds usually for a ship of the line would be max 12 knots or so, which I think, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, would be about 13 to less than 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So, yeah.
We have this, and usually these ships, however, are pretty manpower intensive, since each gun is going to be manned by about 4 to 7 men. And the most of the crew is just required to sail and man the ship, and in combat, they are the gunners. And ships of the line are defined by the gun decks, with the larger second rated first rates having 3 gun decks itself, and most having 2. And the larger the ship and lower, they allowed having very heavy guns. Like, if I'm not mistaken, HMS Victory, which is the first rate, you had 12 pounders. So guns at this time were measured by the weight of the shot that they fired. So a 12 pounder fires a cannonball weighing 12 pounds. Pretty hefty. Those, you had 12 pounders on the top, upper gun deck. But if you go down to the lower gun deck, 32 pounders. So it's quite a thing. Now, usually, there were some rules that had to be followed. They never flew their real flags outside of combat, just to try to keep their identity hidden. But the rule was, if before entering combat, you have to hoist your true colors. You do not do it and engage in combat, it's unpardonable. Your admiralty, your highest naval board, will execute you. And another rule is, you were to fight ships of equal size. Otherwise, and if they are, you ignore the smaller ships. But if the smaller ships attack you first, well, they waive their right of protection, which happened at the Battle of the Nile. Now, the doctrine also varied by navy. While we have the standard line of battle, as you can see in this depiction, it allowed 2 ships fleets to move parallelly to each other and bombard each other. The kind of navy that they served with affected where the shots would go. The French ships tended to focus on the sails and the masts to cripple the enemy from pursuing them. Whereas the British guns aimed lower in comparison, as they tried to smash the hull to smithereens. And right now, the British are going to have a huge advantage in quality of seamanship. That's just like a few cents about the Age of Sail warfare. Now, sec. Nelson had devised a plan while blockading the force at Cadiz. And he believed the standard doctrine of engaging in a broadside in a line of battle is not going to work, as in his view, it led indecisive conflicts. As the line of battle would allow any force to disengage with relative ease, and he wanted to avoid that. So his idea was once he gets news of the Spanish and French fleet's departure from Cadiz, his armada, his fleet will fall into two columns. We have the weather column, which will be led by him, which is the northernmost British column here, and the lee column. And they would go and intercept the French at 2 points, breaking the entire French fleet into 3 parts. And in quick succession, knowing the superior skill of his men and soldiers and sailors, that is the Royal Marines, the gunners, everyone, he believed that they can quickly smash through and disable a lot of the French ships before the vanguard would be able to turn around. That was his broad idea of battle. And the plan had some pretty good ideas. First, they will be able to close in at a very quick pace. Second, it would lead to a free-for-all melee once the ships get into close proximity.
Should we explain to the audience the rationale as to why he's doing that? The difference between, the crossing of the T and
yeah, I think I was going to get to that. It's called raking, but as you can see, by moving perpendicular, or as Craig called it, the crossing of the T, the British ships will maneuver between the French ships, and most ships may have had 1 or 2 very small forward cannons at best. That's it. And if you can maneuver a ship like this perpendicular to the enemy line, you will be able to rake them. That is, you're able to attack an enemy ship with a full broadside, where you're putting a massive amount of firepower, and the enemy can practically not do anything. And that is what was used here, and it is something that will be, devastatingly used. I would even add.
If you don't mind, just for a second,
Yeah.
Can I share something for the
Sure.
audience?
Yeah, sure.
Are you able to see this?
Yep.
All right, so this is for those not watching on YouTube. It's a diagram just explaining the rudimentary concept of what he was explaining is crossing the T. So like as he explained, all warships at this time had very few cannons that could shoot forward. So one of the most rudimentary, the simplistic strategies to defeat anybody in a naval confrontation is the first person to get perpendicular to the enemy, thus showing your broadsides, usually has overwhelming firepower and will just destroy the opponent. Now, what Nelson is trying to do here is basically the complete opposite, and it's also alluding to using some other sailing terms that we'll be talking about later, which you can kind of see in this diagram. This is just how the influence of wind during the age of sail. But Nelson understood that the French had the numbers, especially when it came to numbers of guns. They were aligning themselves. They intended to unleash broadsides upon the Royal Navy. They were using a very simplistic strategy. It was a sound one. But what Nelson, like you were alluding to at the beginning, was going to do was he was just going to crash through in the middle or to break through the all between these ships to cause kind of like a bar fight, like one-on-ones, where they would be more capable of defeating them because then, it's more about the quality of each ship against a few ships that they're facing in the French line. Whereas if the British were to just try to perpendicular, just both go parallel against each other, the British might have been annihilated by the French, just given like the disparity in guns. Yeah.
I don't believe they would have been annihilated, but the campaign would
No,
have
they're not
definitely
lying.
continued long.
They would have
into
lost a
the-
lot of ships for sure.
Actually, I would believe the French would actually just retreat.
Maybe.
One of the problems that Nelson expressed with the battle line tactics while it facilitated better communication, undoubtedly, it is very easy to move away from combat. So Villeneuve would have a lot of chance. So I think this diagram, if you can see this of the map of the battle, will show what Nelson wanted to do. As you can see, if as each ship is going to move in, right, they are going to be able to double shot to like fire from each broadside against two French ships, and maybe, and those French and Spanish ships are going to get like blasted by 40 cannons in an instant each. Whereas at the most, maybe the British will just suffer two shots, two cannons facing against them once they successfully go through. Now, there was the main risk for this entire maneuver is if, as they are approaching, the British are completely vulnerable. Because at that point, the Franco-Spanish fleet has the T. They are crawling. They can launch broadsides and the British cannot reply. This was the biggest gamble Nelson had to take. It wasn't an unprecedented tactic. It had been used before, but it is just not something most commanders would ever do. And funny thing is, Admiral Bilno did express before setting out on the eventual battle day that Nelson is going to do something unorthodox. He just knows it. Now, as you can see, the British do have the weather gauge, which is something I did forget to mention, is whoever controls has the better positioning of the wind. They have the initiative because they can choose whether they will fight or whether they will not engage. And this is very important for ships of the line here. So that is something. And even though Villeneuve knew this unorthodox tactic was coming, he had actually just been completely worn down by now. He was absolutely fatigued, the stress of command and everything. Playing this long cat and mouse game with Nelson for months. Yeah, I get it. That would be really wearing down on you. Now, the combined fleet here gets orders on 16th of September 1805 from Napoleon to sail to Naples. Now, on 8th October, he has a war council with all the captains, and it doesn't go well. Some want to stay at Cadiz, some want to follow the emperor's orders. Now, on 8th of October, Villeneuve made after the conference, he says, yeah, we're staying. We're not moving. 10 days later, he orders them to move, even though they have very light sails going through. And what prompted this great change from Villeneuve? 18th October, he got a letter that Vice Admiral Francis Rosali had arrived in Madrid to take command of the fleet. Napoleon had finally got pissed off with him. He was going to be sacked. So, Greg, what do you do if you're an admiral about to at a port and are supposed to hand over your command against your will? What do you do?
You try to save your career.
By sailing away.
Yeah.
Now, at that time, Villeneuve starts moving forward. And it was around this time he did get the information that the British did lose 6 ships of the line, as I mentioned. 5 who had been sent for supply and escort duty, and the HMS Prince of Wales had been sent back as well for Vice Admiral Robert Calder's court martial. And he used this as his justification to the other captains that now, we outnumber them. We are good to go. Now, after a week of gales, the weather suddenly turned calm. So there's only light breezes that are going to be blowing. And the Franco-Spanish fleet was agonizingly slow in leaving the harbor that the British frigates were continuously observing and signaling Nelson. And they leave in 3 columns initially and head south towards the Straits of Gibraltar. And it takes like an entire day, most of the 20th of October, for the fleet to sort out itself. And it was on that evening of 20th October that the Achille, it's one of the ships here, they actually do spot that at least 18 British ships are in pursuit. So he knows that it's now again a cat and mouse game. And at the same time, he is continuously changing his orders. He first tells you sail in 3 columns, you sail in 2 columns. And when they find out in pursuit was, like this continuous changing with really bad seamen and officers on the Navy. As you can see, it's not really a really coherent line. At 5:40 a.m. on the 21st of October, the British were right now about 21 miles northwest of Cape Trafalgar, with the Franco-Spanish fleet in between them. At 6 a.m., the Nelson does say he gives the order for battle. And at 8 a.m., the British frigate, Audacious, which had been keeping watch on the combined fleet overnight, observed the British fleet still forming the lines in which it would attack. And 8 a.m., now with Vilno now able to see the entire British fleet drawn up into 2 parallel columns. That is Nelson's attack plan. And, he decides to now take an about turn and return to Cadiz. So before the battle, the French were heading south. Now they have to take an about turn and go to the north. And this actually places Rear Admiral Pierre Dumour's rear guard is now going to be the vanguard. So the ships turned where they were. They did not follow in sequence. And at this moment, the wind is shifting quite frequently. So neither side is very gaining that weather advantage, which cost the French and Spanish, with their inexperienced crews, a lot of time to try to get the ships turned around. And the entire turnaround operation of 180 degrees, it took them 1.5 hours to complete that in such conditions. And that same 1.5 hours, Nelson and his fleet are moving closer. At 11 a.m., the fleets are in good visual range, and it's estimated that by 12 noon on the 21st of October, they will be in firing range. Now, Villeneuve has still not even formed his ship up into a line. And as you can see in this diagram, they're not really well spaced. And they kind of are in a sort of semi-crescent kind of formation. But that's not really any choice, it just happened. And Nelson at this point kind of is a bit annoyed. Because of the scattered formation, he does not know where is Villeneuve's flagship. And I'll get to that in a bit. And as a British sailor remarked as they started moving into battle range, he says, during the momentous preparation, the human mind had ample time for meditation, for it was evident that the fate of England rested on this battle.
It's going to be it's called the Nelsonian signal. It's going to be used by the Japanese multiple times in other navies, henceforth. Very, very famous.
Yeah.
At Tsushima.
I do have a quote for that. It's coming to that. 11 a.m., the British fleet is ready and it's moving in. Right now, they are advancing at a crawling pace of 3 knots. That's walking pace for the audience. And it's at 11:45. Nelson sent a signal wanted to send the flag signal that England expects and that every man will do his duty. Now, it was actually at this time there was the signaling officer comes. He says, His Lordship came to me on the poop, and after ordering certain signals to be made, about 1:15 said, Mr. Pascoe, I wish to say to the fleet, England confides that every man will do his duty. And he added, you must be quick, for I have one more to make, which is for close action. I replied, if your Lordship will permit me to substitute expects to confides, The signal will soon be completed because the word expects is in vocabulary and confides must be spelled. His lordship replied in haste with seeming satisfaction. That'll do, Pasco, make it directly. So that's how we have the famous quote, which Admiral Tojo also would be using at Tsushima as well. Now, the crew was actually pretty multinational. There were a few people from various continental states of Europe who were most likely would have been taken from the British naval press gang that kind of pressed everyone into service.
Yeah, I was gonna say
You
no one
had
ever mentions that part about this.
you had I do believe a few Americans as well, and the larger chunks were the other British home nations. So you did have some Irish, you had Scots, you had Welsh, but predominantly still English. Now, the term England was actually used widely to refer to the entire United Kingdom as well. Now, as the battle opened up, and the Spanish are now in the aggressive formation and moving northwards, the British fleet is approaching. So Nelson, as you can see from HMS Victory, is here. This image is a bit more clearer. Is leading the weather column, and Royal Sovereign, which is commanded by Admiral Collingwood, is leading the second column.
It is
And
so
these,
ballsy, by the way, as the commander
oh,
to be in the front of the column because you are certainly going to be blown to pieces. Like, certainly.
indeed. And I think it's around 12:45 or noon, 11:45 to noon. Villo sends a signal, engage the enemy. And the Forgunix is the first ship to open its broadsides. Now, this is a nerve-wracking moment. Like, most of the British ships are going to be sheltered as they are following in a broad column, so they're not going to be as exposed as the lead ships. But Victory and Royal Sovereign are going to be peppered quite heavily. And they are helped by one very crucial aspect: the French sailors. These men are completely inexperienced. Even in the time in Cadiz, the officers did not really consider making time and effort to train these men on gunnery. And you have the rolling swell of a sea. A lot of the shots were ineffective, but as these two formidable first rates start coming forward, they start to get peppered. And soon you have actually the sails of both having a lot of holes in them. Now, just before the British lee column engages the enemy, Collingwood said to his officers, "Now, gentlemen, let us do something today, which the world will talk of hereafter." And now, because of the winds were very light, as I said, it's a harrowing 45, 50 minutes for the British ships as they are moving, and you're getting broadside. It's scary. Even if most of it is not going to hit you, it's going to be terrifying. Now, so after Royal Sovereign had all its sails out, it had an added advantage. It had recently got new sheathing and cleaning done in a dry dock. So the amount of barnacles that were under the ship on its copper hull, that is, so the British used to have this copper hull below the waterline, which kind of helped ease the effect of barnacles and other, organisms or small plant that kind of grow. So it makes the ships more streamlined and efficient. And it outran the rest of the fleet. And soon, not only was she under attack by the Fongenukes, she also is under attack by the Indomitable, the San Justo, which is here, and the San Leandro. And then it does break in the line, and it's the first. So Royal Sovereign is the first to break through. And it breaks through on the rear of the Santa Ana, which is the flagship of Admiral Ava. And in here, it fires a devastating double-shotted broadside into the rear of the Santa Ana. Now, a lot of the British ships, actually all of them, since they were approaching and they would not be able to fire first, during the wait, most of their guns were double or in some cases even triple shotted. So this first barrage that is going to come into any Franco-Spanish ship as they do, that raking fire is going to wreak havoc on everything. Because you're firing 2 to 3 times the normal firepower in that first volley. And after securing that first broadside, Nelson pointed to Royal Sovereign and said, "See how that noble fellow Collingwood carries his ship into action." And said at the same time, Collingwood remarked to his captain, Edward Rotherham, "What would Nelson give to be here?" I'm pretty sure Nelson was a bit annoyed that he was not the first to engage in combat. But Craig, to your point, several British ships did actually try to take over from Nelson in the lead to kind of shield him and his ship from the French barrage as they approached, but he ordered them back. Nothing's going to deter. Now, the second ship in the British line, the Belize, was engaged by the Achille, Argyle, Neptune, and Forgenux, and she was soon completely dismasted. So the Belize took a heavy beating here, and was largely unable to fire as her she could not move, and she kept flying her flag and not showing the sign of surrender. Now, Victory was under fire for 40 minutes from Heros, Santa Misa Triad, Redoutable, and Neptune. And she was taking some casualties, and they had to steer her a little bit. And it's at 12:45 that they finally break through the line. Nelson's target was first the Bicantiore, which was Admiral Bilno's flagship. It was his very favorite tactic of going to the commander's ship and engaging it directly. Cut off the head, destroy the command structure, confusion everywhere.
It's exactly what Togo did, by the way, at Tsushima. It's like a very, very similar battle, just saying.
And she comes between, and Nelson, Victory was going to be coming in after some steering course correction between the Redoutable here and the Bicantiore. And she is coming in loaded. Victory is coming with all of her guns double or triple shotted. And British ships also had 68-pound carronades. So they're like massive mortars. Each ship of the line carried maybe 2 at most. And each carronade shot is having 500 musket balls. And all of these are just waiting for the moment Victory pierces the line. You can imagine what's going to happen. And the first broadside on the Bicantiore, carnage reigned. And about 400 men of the 800 complement of Bicantiore were casualties in that first salvo. And it is completely dismasted that the flagship of the Franco-Spanish fleet was out of action. And Villeneuve thought that a boarding would take place, and with the eagle of his ship in his hand, he said, "I will throw it onto the enemy ship and we will take it back." However, Bicantiore would not be facing Victory in boarding action. Victory would engage with the Redoutable, and Bicantiore is going to face the next 3 ships of the windward column, which is the Tremenine, the Conqueror, and the Neptune. Now, as all the British ships started coming in, so even though the British have now started penetrating the line, they still don't have the numbers and the firepower. It's taking time for the other columns to move in. But every time they do, as the French ships start to gang up on the Brits, a new British ship will come in and they are going to put in a devastating raking barrage. Now, in victory would lock masks with the redoubtable, so these ships are now completely tangled up. And unfortunately for victory, redoubtable had one of the strongest boarding parties available to any ship on the battlefield. And this is like I think this is like to say that they're the core day elite of the boarding, I guess. If you were to talk about Romans, it's like having the first legion against like peasants in the ancient times. But luckily for victory at this moment, the Temeran arrived near Redoubtable, and from its broadside fired a grape shot which completely, caused carnage on that ship. And it's at this point Redoubtable is down to has suffered 500 casualties. Its captain Lucas has only 99 men fit out of a complement of almost 650, and they do surrender. And the Bricantor is also fighting. But while the ship surrendered, it is at this moment tragedy strikes the Brits, as a sharpshooter on one of the masts of the Redoubtable, he notices Nelson down, who had disregarded or like suggestions from the other officers of not wearing his full attire. So he was not just looking like an officer. You know that this is the commander. And he shoots him from up top with a musket ball going through his left shoulder, through the spine and at the 6th and 7th vertebra, and lodged 2 inches below his right scapula in his back. And it was at this moment, as you see this painting, Nelson had said, "They finally succeeded. I am dead." He wasn't dead yet, but he was carried down to the orlop deck, which is the deck slightly below the waterline where the surgeon's room was stationed.
I was gonna say that is a nasty hit. Oh my God.
Yeah. But I think this is an example of what you can see what a demastered ship completely looks like. It's just a hulk. Doesn't feel like it's a ship. And this is for the audience who will watch it on YouTube. This picture is a great example of what raking fire is doing to the Franco-Spanish fleet. They cannot fire, and in sequence, as the British ship is going to pass by, they are leading through a massive, barrage. Now, as more British ships start entering the battlefield, the ships of the French center and rear guard were gradually overwhelmed. Now, it's at this point, the morning's rear guard, I'll call it, who are now the vanguard, they start taking a turn. This is on the orders of Admiral Pierre, who was the rear guard commander, but now had to take command. And while Villo is, unable to command anymore with his ship completely out of action, the second admiral to get injured is Gravina. He was wounded, while several of his other ships and officers were also killed as they gave their men the order not to surrender their ships. Gravina, unfortunately, he survives the battle, but he's going to die a slow, agonizing death as he dies of these wounds inflicted at this battle several months later. Now, a lot of the French ships are going to be captured. So by the end of it is like we are looking at 20 ships captured. And
Oof.
Indeed. And there is just one incident I do need to talk about is when Admiral Pierre Dumonor Lepelli leads the vanguard. So this is about 10 ships here, right, that have not engaged. they have to turn around and they want to come and attack the British column. As they're against the wind, it takes an entire hour again to just turn the ships again 180 degrees.
Oh, God, that's
And
rough.
this is before Nelson is shot. And this is where our little ship here, HMS Africa, plays a bit of a role in the story. Africa wasn't really one of the best maintained or best constructed ships in the Royal Navy. That's why it drastically drifted off course. At this time, it's under the command of Captain Digby, who is from a very prominent naval family in his own right. And Robert Digby is, sorry, it was Henry Digby. His uncle was also an admiral, so my bad. So Nelson does order Africa to, make all sail. Nelson's intended order: make all sail and escape. You're completely outnumbered and outgunned. Digby chooses to deliberately misinterpret the orders as like make all sail to intercept the enemy. And this 164-pounder, 64-gun ship, sorry, it fires off several broadsides quite effectively against the French vanguard. And then it'll move south, and it is going to engage in a duel with several other British ships with the Santisima Trinidad. Now, this ship is the biggest behemoth on the battlefield with 130 guns. And, they would be losing. And Africa would be a ship that would lose 62 men of its complement. Digby would get a lot of criticism 10 years after the battle for disobeying Nelson's actions. That one of the former Nelsonic band of brothers, who was at that time Vice Admiral Thomas Hardy, he would say that, I beg to assure you, Lord Nelson expressed great satisfaction at the gallant manner in which you passed the enemy's line. And I think that's definitely something Nelson would have definitely approved of. Now, amongst the entire vanguard that would be turning around, it is only the Intrepid here that even makes a serious effort to engage the British fleet. The rest of the vanguard, they fire a few very ineffective volleys just to kind of like show that, yeah, we participated in the battle. We expended several volleys. They hit absolutely nothing. And they withdrew from the battle completely. Mostly, and just about 4 French ships. That several Spanish crews that were captured was so pissed off with this betrayal. They begged the British that, can we please use our guns to fire on them? So that is what we happen. And these 4 ships that we are talking about will head north and would be, near at the Battle of Cape Trafalgar by a British squadron by Sir Richard Strachan would capture all 4 of them. So these 4 that do escape will be, they are going to still suffer the same fate. Now, on the orlop deck of HMS Victory, Nelson knows, I think his time has come. And he's still getting reports, but he still manages to get the report at around 4 p.m. that final victory was secured. He then asks Captain Hardy that to take care of his lady Hamilton for him and to kiss him, because Hardy was one of his very closest friends. And then before he dies, it is said, thank God I've done my duty. And then he passes. Now, if you're to talk about the numbers, right, since the battle part is over, of the 33 French ships, 17 were captured and 1 destroyed. The British had 5 ships damaged. none destroyed. And in terms of casualties, we are talking about over 4,400 Franco-Spanish sailors and Marines dead, over 2,500 wounded, and more than 8,000 taken prisoner. That's more than 50 to 55% of the force.
That's
The
overwhelming. Holy shit.
the Royal Navy had 458 killed and about 1,200 wounded, and their complement is about 18,000 men, so it's not even 10% of the casualties.
Yeah.
One of his final orders before passing was to anchor as they knew a storm was to come down. However, when the storm blew up, many of the damaged vessels of the enemy ran aground as sank. And the French and Spanish actually used this opportunity to reboard and get rid of the prize crews to try to take them back. And there was still some humanitarian gestures, as later several French prisoners and the British prize crews were exchanged within the the aftermath. But during this that gale, Pluton, Neptune, Indomitable, the Spanish 100 first-rate Rayo, and San Francisco de Aldes, along with the frigates and 2 brigs, escaped. These are the only ships of the French that successfully escaped. The rest are either captured or killed. That storm that hit, the French actually took a bigger beating. So it's estimated that more percentage of their casualties of the killed and wounded actually took place during that storm. And with the damage and the reluctance of the crews and that infighting that took place, Collingwood did his best, since he's now taken over command of the fleet, to recover the prizes, which is what is the term used for any captured vessel. But it was unfortunately not possible. He wrote in the aftermath of the storm, "The condition of our own ships was such that it was very doubtful what would be their fate. Many a time I would have given the whole group of our capture to ensure our own. I can only say that in my life I never saw such efforts as were made to save these prize ships, and would rather fight another battle than pass through such a week as it followed it." So the Brits did take a hammering from the storm as well. And that was the end. And when the admiral who had been ordered by Napoleon to take command, he arrives at Cadiz. He's expecting 18 French ships of the line at the very least. He finds 5.
Oh boy.
Now, these ships will remain in Cadiz till 1808, until Napoleon turns on Spain and invades, and then they will be used to fight against the French. HMS Victory, Nelson's flagship, it makes its way to Gibraltar for repairs, and Nelson's body is being transported. And a lot of the men who are injured are put ashore on Gibraltar to get medical treatment. Now, this battle takes place a day after the Battle of Ulm. And Napoleon is not going to hear it till a bit after Austerlitz. So that's quite a while away. And Ulm is no small victory, since Napoleon completely crushed an entire Austrian army.
Of course.
And when he hears about this, he kept a tight grip over the Paris media to keep this defeat a closely guarded secret for a month. And the papers proclaimed, "We had a great victory." And, well, I guess propaganda always matters, right? Vice Admiral Bilno was taken prisoner. He would be taken back to Britain, and after parole in 1806, he returns to France. And he's found in an inn room and was declared to have committed suicide. But there were 6 stab wounds from a dining knife chest. I don't know, that doesn't sound like a suicide to me.
It sounds like the cameras were turned off for a split second there, and the security guards just didn't see anything.
indeed. And while the battle would not affect the Third Coalition, War of the Third Coalition, it did ensure that Britain would dominate the seas. And after Trafalgar, no one dared to challenge the British Navy till the German High Seas Fleet would come in World War One, which would lead to the Battle of Jutland. Which, Greg, I think we can just tell the audience that's an upcoming future series we just have for that particular
Oh my
event.
God. I don't even know how we'll cover it because it's the Battle of Jutland is confusing as it's so chaotic. It's almost
It's
like Letty Golf. It's really it's hard
it's
to
a
know.
mini series.
Yeah,
It's going to be a mini series.
sure.
But
But
I thought just since that is the only incident where someone did challenge the Royal Navy for over 100 years,
very true.
and the victory here would allow the Royal Navy to continue to play a leading role in the destruction of Napoleon's empire, because they are able to protect British trade, disrupt enemy trade, and that keeps Britain rich, and that allows them to bankroll the hell out of the Austrian, Russian, and Prussian armies. The amount of material support Britain gives all of its continental allies during the wars against Napoleon is immense. No small thanks part, and thanks to the Royal Navy. Now, Nelson's body is preserved in a barrel of brandy, and he is, yeah, he is, brought home to London, and that barrel is lashed to his mainmast. And he is to be given a state funeral, and he's the first non-royal to be given the honor of a state funeral for in 83 years, because the previous one who got it was the Duke of Marlborough, John Churchill, an ancestor to Winston Churchill. And even for Nelson's funeral, at that time, the Prince of Wales, who would later become King George IV, he actually wanted to attend Nelson's funeral as a chief mourner in that official capacity, but was not allowed to by his father, King George III, as protocol dictated he cannot do it unless it's for a royal. So he does attend in a private capacity, as does the entire royal family as well. So Nelson's body is laid in state at Greenwich Hospital for 3 days. And then, as you can see, this is a procession of his coffin going to St. Paul's Cathedral to be interred. It's moved by river first, and it's a procession that has 32 admirals, over 180 carriages, and thousands of soldiers and civilians lining to pay their respects to Britain's greatest hero. And his coffin was made out of timbers from the main mast of the Lorient, which was blown apart at the Battle of the Nile. Now, in this legacy, as you said, Nelson has become a cult-like hero for Britain. And a lot of the British admirals in the aftermath of Nelson's career wanted to emulate him. Some key examples I can think of are definitely Jackie Fisher. Then you definitely have Thomas Cochrane, most of all, Admiral Andrew Brown Cunningham, our friend from our World War II series. They definitely wanted to emulate Nelson. And even Napoleon had said during his exile on St. Helena, what Nelson had, he did not acquire it. It was a gift from nature. And the British have definitely honored Nelson. So this is Nelson's column at Trafalgar Square in London. And I have to admit, personally, it's one of the most beautiful places in London to me. So yeah, I guess that's where we can end this Nelson's greatest moment in his career.
And again, I will remind the audience, if you did not watch this on YouTube, yet again, it is a lot easier to follow, especially with these naval battles when we have our maps up with all the names of the ships and the positions and everything. I really do recommend going forward that if you have a chance, use the YouTube Music app, even if you're not trying to watch it. But, you know, again, we're gonna try and do our best to keep up more of a visual aspect to this because I see this podcast evolving more so on YouTube than even than even the podcast platforms because that just seems to be the way that podcasts are moving forward. Uh, for those who aren't aware, it's being heavily pushed by platforms like YouTube, and they really want to get their kind of knife in that market. But again, if you want to further support this channel, please consider joining the YouTube membership or the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. You get early access to all the content I make, which is like about a month or two in advance. So I think it's worth your while there. And voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. The latest episode for the exclusive series is a alternate history episode, and it's going to be an alternate history of the Pacific War. The first episode is titled "The Great Naval Battle of Pearl Harbor," and I think it is pretty insane, but also grounded in a lot of evidence. There's a
I
lot
would
of
say that
yeah.
I listened to it. I really enjoyed that episode.
I took in
It's
yeah.
there's a logical sequence because
Oh, there's
alternative history
illogical
is,
stuff. I had to like pull some, I had to twist some arms to try and get the scenario to be what it was. I won't
but
say it here, but I wanted a different scenario and I just couldn't find a logical basis for it. But yeah,
but it was a great episode, Greg. I'm really looking forward to this series. And I'm not the biggest fan of alternate history, but this is one I'm definitely looking forward to.
it takes a lot more time to write. All the other episodes that are not alternate history, you can imagine at least like it takes me a few days to really kind of like the research, write it up and all that. This took so long. It's going to be a while before I have the second episode because I have to juggle all the butterfly effects, but it's a lot of fun. I really want to push it because I really want to push the YouTube membership even more so than the Patreon account. All of the funds from both are going exclusively to uh, I don't know if I can't dox them. There are a couple though. It's an interesting situation. My animator is actually a couple that are working together, and they finished my second episode in a series covering the invasion of North China. They're working on the third episode, and they are extremely expensive. I mean, I'm paying them the fair price that it is. And just to say, my funds from the Patreon and the YouTube membership barely cover like 40% of a single episode. So I'm really hoping to grow because I want to push more and more content. And animating is what kills me. I can write and do research really quick, but animating takes way too much time, and I just don't have enough time to dedicate to it. So I'd love to have them full time, at least one episode a month if possible. But stating all of that, Gaurav, thank you for taking me hostage on this great and legendary naval
My pleasure.
battle. And well, we're gonna have a lot of stuff coming up soon. So stay tuned.